Hey, this is Randy Kaufman with All Things Engineering. And this is a new channel, so please subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you like the video. But today I'm going to go over BreadX was really a bad idea. Now, if you look at the chart over here, this is the imports. And so, yeah, China's number one at 13 point something percent, but I think 13.9. And you've got the United States. Germany is the second biggest one, but Germany is part of the EU. So is France, so is Italy, so is all these other countries. You total all this up, it comes to about 40%. There's some on down at like Greece and others that add a few tenths of percent and stuff. But it's a little bit over 40%. So a little bit over your 40% of your import are coming from one economic area. And it's not, and then, I mean, the EU is not, they're listing these countries separately, but really the EU is almost a country now. It's not quite, but and everybody still has their own capital. Everybody all has their prime ministers and all this. But the thing is, they're all under one money. They're all can travel together now. They're all together. So it used to be that for ever since the Middle Ages, that the the English would govern and they would attack the French. The French would govern, and the Germans would govern and attack the French. The Italians would attack the Romanians. The Polish people would get attacked by the Germans. And they always had all these little wars all over Europe all the time. So after World War II, and you know, after 30 something years after World War II, 40 years, they finally developed the European Union and they all came together. And it's expanded, and then they're still talking about expanding it more. I mean, Turkey's talked about getting in. Of course, the Ukrainian war is going on, but Ukraine won't send to the European Union. There's a lot of countries that want to get in. Ukraine wanted to get in before the war even started. So when you're looking at this, you know, you start having all these little countries, and they're basically no bigger than our states are. I mean, you look at Texas, and Texas dwarfs this, and look at California, and it dwarfs it. But this is not; these countries are not very big anyway. But now they all still they want to hold on to their power. All the politicians do, and of course the UK never went into this thing really seriously because they always said, "Oh, we're going to keep our money. We're not going to the European, and we're not going to go to the euro." I guarantee you right now they wish they had went to the euro because their money is falling through the floor. They're having bad economic problems, and a lot of their bad economic problems are because of BreadX. Now, the politicians back years ago when they were talking about BreadX, they were selling a bill of goods and they were telling them, look, what we're going to do is we're going to have 5 billion extra pounds every year to spend on schools. Because we spend all this money and it all goes to Brussels. Well, they quoted a figure of like 350 million pounds per week, but because it was supposed to be 1% of the GDP. But when Margaret Thatcher got into the European Union, they let them come in with like about 60 something percent of that money. So a third of that they weren't sending. They were only sending like 250 million pounds per week. But then they didn't tell about the fact that, oh, wait a minute now, the European Union was also sending that money back. They were spending so much in scientific research. They were sending farmers money. They were doing transportation as far as roads and stuff. And a lot of that money came back to the UK. But they didn't tell that. They omitted that and said all this money is going to the European Union and none of it's coming back. But of course, they don't want the leaders of the UK didn't want to actually, be a team member. They wanted to be the rulers still. Like, they They were so used to being having all their colonies all over the world. I mean, at the time that this stuff was going on, the British still had Hong Kong. Even Hong Kong was only turned over in 1999, and so this was even before that the European Union first formed. And so they didn't really, they were still like, oh, we're imperialistic and we have all this, but they don't have the money. Like, they don't have the resources coming in from these foreign countries like they used to for free. So they don't have, like, like if it's Hong Kong, well, they can ship them, like, parts and stuff from Hong Kong, electronic parts, and they don't have to pay a tariff on it because it's theirs. They had stuff in India for years and years, so they were used to being the rulers. And if they had probably put the EU in London instead of in Brussels, probably Europe, probably the UK would have been fine to stay in at that point because it's in our country and we're the rulers. But but they sold a bill of goods, and they're like all politicians. I don't care what, they're politicians, our politicians, all politicians all over the world are the same way. They lie. They're in it for themselves, and they're mostly psychopaths. And they don't really care about you or anybody else. What they care about is staying in power, getting the money to flow into them, and getting all the prestige and the fame and the glamour from it. Now, they did not, so they sold a bill of goods for this, and now the people in the UK, 56% said Brexit is a bad idea. 37% said it's a good idea. So that's a big change from when they voted to get this out. And they're already realizing, and they haven't been out but about a year, and they're already realizing that the heartaches that this is causing them. They can't get truck drivers in. A lot of their truck drivers came from Europe. And so they couldn't even get people, they couldn't get people to transport goods. And they couldn't get the goods on the shelves, couldn't get people to stock it because they didn't have the people to do that with. They were having trouble getting fish in. I saw people talking about, the fish market was just horrible for them. That they're used to, they could get all these fish. And I'm like, well, of course, you had Poland, you had the North Sea, the Baltic Sea and all that. And you had all these different countries. Well, the European Union owns a lot of that sea. So they can, and then you've got stuff in the south. I mean, different fish grow in different areas. And, when you go down to the bottom of Spain, of course, the fish there are different than the fish that grow in the North Sea. But they couldn't get the fish that they were normally getting because that's a big commodity for the UK. They really like the fish and chips. So they were having trouble getting that in. And then the duties went up to $4.5 billion last year, and it's going to go higher next year. So now this has wiped out everything that they were putting in to the UK, to the EU. This wipes out everything. I mean, by the time what they were putting in and they were getting back, this wipes it out because of the extra duties. And the business is there now. I saw some of them the other day. They were talking, well, we're talking about just closing down and opening up an office over in Germany or over in Switzerland or something because of the duties and the transporting it in and out. We can't make any money. And it's so hard to transport in and out with all the duties now. And they were like, well, we need to, so, when a business starts moving out or they're shutting down their business and they're not transporting it out to the EU anymore, they're going to make a lot less money too. And that's going to hurt them. But the Scotland, they wanted to cede from the UK. They wanted to get out of the UK so they could stay in. Scotland voted to stay in to the European Union. The English wouldn't let them because the English had more people and the UK decided, and even though Scotland's really kind of its own country, well, no, you're going to have to go into it too. You're going to have to get Brexit too, even though they didn't want it. Northern Ireland wouldn't go. and they didn't. And so it's been a big mess from day one. And but they sold them a bill of goods, and the politicians have still not come around and realized, you know, we really need to rethink this because this has really hurt us really, really bad. And their money is collapsing. At one point, it used to be, I remember growing up and stuff, the pound was worth like $1.70. And the pound now is worth less than a dollar. And it's collapsed in the last little bit. And there's not, doesn't look like going to be a rebound either. The euro is worth more than the pound is. But they didn't want the euro. So they got their pound, and their money is falling through the floor. They're having really bad economic times, and most of all this is because of Brad X. I mean, the COVID didn't help them, but the COVID hurt like everybody else. But their inflation is even way higher than ours is, and people talk about inflation here. But it's like Russia's inflation is like 27%, and Turkey's at about 80. It's a worldwide phenomenon, inflation right now. But they're in this together. I mean, the thing was, England didn't want to get into this together and be a marriage. Just like with us and our states it's all a marriage. Kentucky never pays in like what, New York, California, and all these other states do. And, they get like $2 and something for every dollar they send in. They get back from the federal government. But we're all in this together, and you got to try to help develop the poorer areas. And that was the same way with the European Union was going to do. But the UK didn't like that. And, but it's like once you develop a poorer area, a poorer country over there, or like we develop a poorer state, and you bring their standards of living up and you develop it better, and they start producing stuff and they start buying your stuff, it's in the long run, it's only going to help you. But you got to be long-sighted. You got to be caring for your own people, which, of course, their politicians didn't like every other politician. They all want their money, their power. That's what they want to stay in, and they'll sell you any bill of goods as long as they can be the top dog and be the good, and look good and get all the money coming into them. And that was what this was all about. It was about the power that the UK did not want to share with the EU. And the people in the UK realize that now. They realize, that the bill of goods that they were sold by those politicians back when they voted for this, none of this stuff panned out. And it's really hurt them. It's been really detrimental to the UK. But guys, thanks for watching. Remember, give it a thumbs up, and I hope you liked the show.